Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. If you're new, hi there. I am Buitapa Ramonto. Welcome to my space where we talk all things budgeting. I am not a financial guru, nor am I a registered financial advisor. Just a girl passionate about personal finance, sharing my journey, the mistakes, the lessons, and everything I'm learning along the way. If that tickles your fancy, please hit that red subscribe button so that we can learn and grow together. In today's video, we are budgeting my salary for the month of May. So I went on my budget date. I think it was the first one or the second one this year. I kind of stopped for a few months. I also don't have any reason why I stopped. But then I realized that I need to go back because it's something that I really enjoyed doing and I still enjoy doing it. So we are officially back with our monthly budget dates. As you have seen at the beginning of the video, I went to McDonald's and I spent less than 50 rands. I didn't order anything hectic, but I'm only sharing the budget now. I know it's a bit late, but I guess better late than never. So I made myself a cup of coffee because it's very cold in Cape Town. I actually got this cup from my employer. It was a gift at our year-end function. Before we get into the budget for May, we obviously have to review the month of April. If you've been a part of this channel for quite some time, you know I always emphasize the reviewing of the previous month before you get into a new month. You need to get the variance between what was budgeted and the actual. And you know what this means? You have to track your spending. In order for you to get the actual figures, you need to track your spending. And this is a step that a lot of people miss, or this is something that a lot of people don't do. They would sit down, draft the budget at the beginning of the month, but they don't actually review. They don't track their spending to check at the end of the month. Okay, this is what I had budgeted, but what did I actually spend? I can't emphasize this enough. It is a very crucial part of your budgeting process because this is where you get to see your spending patterns. It exposes your habits, and you might find that when you do this step, you will realize there are things that you're paying for that you don't even need. One of my clients realized that they were paying so much money on subscriptions, but they were not even using those subscriptions. And I think I mentioned this one before. This guy never realized how much money he was spending on alcohol until we went through his bank statement. The shock on his face, he could not believe how much money he was spending on alcohol. And that's because he was not aware, right? So this step is very crucial because it makes you aware and conscious of the things that you are spending on and basically your relationship with money. So please don't ever skip this step. If you're going to draft a budget every month but never track your spending and actually review it, then it's a futile exercise, honestly. There's a quote that goes like, stupidity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting the same results. So please, don't be that person, okay? How did April go? Overall, I think it was a relatively good month. There are, of course, things that happened which I could have never really prepared myself for. And that's the other thing with budgeting. Just because you planned doesn't mean that everything is going to go exactly the way you planned, but it is always good and advisable that you plan instead of you just cruising with no direction. The highlight of the month, I went to Johannesburg. Initially, I was supposed to be in Johannesburg for a few days, then go to Botswana. But unfortunately, things happened and I couldn't go to Botswana, which meant that I was going to be home, or I was home longer than expected. And I had to spend on certain things which I did not really budget for or think about. But overall, it was a good month. So we're quickly going to go through the month of April so that you can see how I spent my money. So we're going to start with my savings and investments. If you saw my video where I was sharing my goals for the year, I have like a big goal, if I can call it that. So I save 3,500 rands every month, but it's not an amount that builds up. Well, it does actually build up, but it's an amount that I save and get to use because I have like set goals for this amount. So every month I put aside 3,500, and there are months where I withdraw from this fund and other months I don't. But at the end of the year, or rather the total for the goals and things that I have planned is 42,000 rand. So as I am saving that amount, I'm also just using it throughout the year. I hope that makes sense. If it doesn't make sense, please just go watch that video. I'll try to link it somewhere on this video. I had budgeted 3,500. I did actually save that 3,500, of which I took 2,500 for the traveling costs to Johannesburg. So the closing balance was 5,500. Moving over to my expenses, we have housing. So the first expense is rent, 2,500, and I spent 2,500. Insurance, 200, I spent 200. Electricity, 200, and I spent 200. Phone or airtime, the budget was 100 rand, but I spent 200 rand. So what happened here is there was a time where I wanted to buy electricity. I don't know what was going through my head, but instead of me buying electricity, I ended up buying 100 rand airtime. So yeah, for storage, I budgeted 60 and I spent 60. So the total budgeted was 3,060, but the total spent was 3,160. Moving over to the next category, which is food. So for groceries, I had budgeted 750. I spent 850. Like I said, I was home. So there were certain things that to buy. So sometimes I just want to cook certain things and you find that they don't have it at home. So I had to buy those ingredients, especially because my parents were not around. So I had to buy those ingredients. And then pocket money, I had budgeted 250 and I spent 343. So the total budgeted was 1,000, the total spent was 1,193. Moving over to health, as you guys know, I don't have a medical aid, so I budgeted 200 for the insurance fund and I spent 200. And then moving over to the next category, which is transportation. Transportation to church, the budget was 400, but I spent 430. I had under budgeted there. Transportation to work, the budget was 560, the total was 528. I did add a little extra when I budgeted because I knew I might have to use an Uber one of the good days. So the total was 528. We spent 528. Moving over to the next category, which is personal. So for personal care, I had budgeted 200 and I only spent 38 rand. Hair care, 330, but I only spent 140, and this was for something that was not in the budget. I bought myself a dress at Exact. I really needed the dress because of things that happened with my traveling. So yeah, bank charges, I had budgeted 50, I only spent 41 rand 60 cents. And then miscellaneous, I had allocated 185 and I actually spent 185. So the budgeted was 765 and the actual was 614 rand 60 cents. And then moving over to loans, I had bought things using Payflex and the budget was 903, but I spent 904. So I think it was just a matter of rounding. Then last category is youth. I had budgeted 200 and I contributed 200 for that. And then sinking fund, gifts and giving, I had budgeted 250 and I actually spent 250. So overall, I exceeded my budget with 141 rand 60, but I did allocate some of these costs to the traveling money that I had put aside. Now we get into the month of May. For savings and investments, I invested 5,000 Rand, but I'm still just learning more about investing. So there isn't much to say about that. Then I have 15,250 in my emergency fund. And then we've got the big fund. The opening balance is 5,500. And I am planning to contribute 3,500. So the total will then be 9,000. For my expenses, we're going to start with housing. I have rent, that is 2,500. And then insurance, 200. For electricity, I'm just gonna add 30 rands because I don't know what's been happening lately. So for electricity, I have budgeted 230, storage 60. For airtime, I budgeted 50 rand because I still have the 100 rand from the previous month, right? Total will be 3,040. To the next category, food. I have allocated or budgeted 800 for food. I usually do weekly restocks, so I have allocated 200 for every week. And then pocket money 200. For health, amount stays the same. Actually, I couldn't call it a fixed amount, so I have budgeted 200. And then for moving over to transportation to church, I have budgeted 500. And then transportation to work, I have budgeted 700 rands. Moving over to the next category, which is personal. So for personal care, I budgeted 190 because there was money left over from the previous month. I'm just going to add on that and buy sunscreen and face cream. And then hair care, same thing. There was 210 left over in the previous month. So I only budgeted 140. I will add on to what was left in the previous month. Bank charges, budgeted 50 Rand once again. Loans, oh, I can't wait. This is my final payment for the Payflex 515 Rand. And then we've got the last category, which is others. I have youth. I'm going to contribute 100 Rand. And then sinking fund, gifts and giving. I have allocated 400 Rand. Mother's Day is coming up and there are two birthday celebrations. So this is just a top up on what is already there to make sure that I get my friends and my mom a gift. I will explain the sinking funds in more detail when I do my payday routine so that you can understand my thought process, the opening balances, and everything. So, yeah. And then for miscellaneous, this is for minor expenses that occur throughout the month. I have allocated 440. And how I calculated this is after budgeting for everything else, there was 440 Rand left. I use a zero-based budgeting method, so I just decided to allocate this 440 to miscellaneous. It only made sense. So income less expenses equals to zero. Total for all is 10,775. That's it for my budget for the month of May. I will post another video where I take you guys through my payday routine and the cash stuffing method. Thank you so much for watching. If you haven't subscribed, please kindly do so. And don't forget to share this with your friends. It does help for YouTube to push it for more people to see. I will see you in the next one. Bye. We are budgeting 10,775 rands.